In the small, rust-covered town of Clearbrook, nestled in a forgotten valley where the highway seemed to bypass entirely, there lived a man named Hank Pearson. Hank wasn't famous, nor was he particularly wealthy. But if there was one thing Hank was known for, it was his hands. Those hands had built, fixed, and restored more engines than anyone could count, and every vehicle that rolled out of his garage seemed to hum with a little extra life. Hank had been a mechanic for as long as anyone could remember, running a garage that had been passed down to him from his father, and his father's father before that. It wasn't much, just a simple two-bay shop with a tin roof that rattled every time the wind blew, and a faded sign that read Pearson's Garage, but it was the heartbeat of Clearbrook. If your car broke down, your tractor sputtered out, or your truck wouldn't start, you went to Hank. And Hank, with a cigarette dangling from his mouth and his ever-present oil-stained cap, would fix it. Always. Hank's life followed a simple rhythm. He woke up early, had a cup of coffee at the local diner where the regulars all knew his name, and then he'd head to the garage. He'd spend his days under the hood of one vehicle or another, his radio softly playing old country songs as he worked. The town trusted Hank with their machines because he didn't just repair them, he seemed to understand them, as if the engines spoke a language only he could hear. But Hank's quiet life changed one summer when a sleek, black car roared into Clearbrook. It was a rare sight to see a vehicle like that in a town where old pickup trucks were more common than sedans, and its entrance caused a stir. The car pulled up to Hank's garage, its engine sputtering as if in protest. Out stepped a man who looked out of place, polished shoes, a crisp suit, and sunglasses that reflected the sun. He was tall, with the kind of presence that turned heads, but Hank, being Hank, didn't even glance up from the truck he was working on. "Can I help you?" Hank asked, wiping his hands on a greasy rag as the man approached. "I hope so," the stranger said, his voice smooth and measured. "My car's in trouble, and I was told you're the best mechanic around." Hank finally looked up, eyes squinting through the sunlight. He had seen plenty of cars in his life, but this one was different. A 1968 Dodge Charger, midnight black, with an engine that purred like a wildcat when it wasn't sputtering, that is. The car looked like it belonged on a racetrack, not in a sleepy town like Clearbrook. "Looks like you've got a beauty on your hands," Hank said, stepping closer to the car and running a hand along its fender. "But something's off, isn't it?" The stranger smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You could say that. I've had this car for years, but lately, she's been giving me trouble. Every mechanic I've taken her to can't seem to figure out what's wrong. I was hoping you'd have better luck." Hank didn't say much. He simply nodded and motioned for the man to leave the car in the bay. "I'll take a look. Come back in a couple of days." The man agreed, handed Hank the keys, and without much more than a nod, walked away, leaving the Charger in Hank's care. As the sun began to set and the town quieted down, Hank stayed late in the garage, leaning over the engine of the Dodge Charger. Something about the car intrigued him. It was more than just a machine, it was a piece of history, built for speed and power, but now worn down by years of use. Hank loved these kinds of challenges. He spent hours under the hood, dismantling parts, inspecting the engine, and running his hands over the metal like a doctor checking a patient. But something was odd. Despite all the power the car was built for, its engine seemed strained, like it was fighting itself. Hank was about to call it a night when he noticed something, a small, barely noticeable engraving on the engine block. It was almost invisible, but with his sharp eye for detail, Hank recognized it. The symbol was old, one he hadn't seen since his youth when his father taught him the ins and outs of mechanics. It was a mark that belonged to a group of custom car builders from back in the day, men who specialized in creating vehicles meant for something more than just driving. Hank couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this car. The next morning, Hank returned to the garage early, his mind buzzing with questions. He started stripping down the Charger's engine, piece by piece, until he found it, a hidden compartment tucked beneath the chassis, filled with small, meticulously placed components that didn't belong in any normal car. "What in the world?" Hank muttered to himself. Inside the compartment were delicate wires, microchips, and a device that Hank couldn't quite place. It looked like it had no business being in a car built in the 60s. Hank wasn't a tech expert, but he knew enough to realize this was something more than just a simple mechanical issue. As he stood there, trying to make sense of the strange find, the door to the garage creaked open. The man in the suit was back, earlier than expected. His expression was no longer casual, it was intense, as if he knew exactly what Hank had discovered. "You found it, didn't you?" the man asked, stepping forward. Hank straightened up, crossing his arms. "I don't know what kind of car you're running here, but this ain't your average problem." The man sighed and removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were sharp and calculating. "It's not just a car. Let's just say it's special. And the people who built it? Well, they built it for a purpose. I'm guessing you've already figured out this isn't just about a broken engine." Hank frowned. "What's going on here?" The man stepped closer, lowering his voice. That car was part of a project, back in the late 60s, when cars like these were being modified for more than just racing. Governments, private firms, even criminals wanted cars that could do more than just outrun the law. They wanted machines that could hide secrets, carry out missions, disappear when needed. That charger? It's one of the few that's still out there. Hank blinked. This was far beyond anything he had ever dealt with. And what do you want from me? I need you to fix it, the man said simply. But more than that, I need you to keep quiet. The wrong people are looking for this car, and if they find out you've seen what's inside, well, let's just say it wouldn't be good for you or this town. Hank stared at the man, then glanced back at the charger. The car was more than just a machine, it was a weapon, a tool designed for something far bigger than himself or Clearbrook. After a long silence, Hank nodded. I'll fix it. But when I'm done, you take it and don't come back. The man smiled, though it was cold. Deal. For the next few days, Hank worked on the charger in secret, dismantling the strange device and fixing the engine without asking too many questions. It was a delicate process, and Hank knew that if he made one wrong move, it could blow up in his face, literally. But after long hours and sleepless nights, he finally got the car running smoothly again. When the man in the suit returned to pick it up, Hank handed him the keys without a word. The man nodded in appreciation. You've done good work, Pearson. Better than anyone else could have. I'll make sure no one comes asking questions. And with that, he drove off, the charger roaring to life as it disappeared down the road, leaving Hank standing in the dust. For weeks after, Hank couldn't shake the feeling that he had just been a part of something bigger than he could comprehend. But he never told anyone what had happened, not even his closest friends at the diner. The charger became a ghost story in his mind, just another job, another machine that had come and gone. But every now and then, when he was working late in the garage, Hank would hear the distant rumble of a powerful engine in the night, and he would wonder if the charger was still out there, running like a ghost on the highways, carrying secrets that no one would ever know. And in the quiet of Clearbrook, life went on, just as it always had. But Hank Pearson, the mechanic with the magic hands, knew that somewhere out there, his work had become part of a much larger story, one that would never be told.